Hello and welcome to my final 100 Epic Reads of a Lifetime poster reading vlog of 2023. Holy crap, time is flying by. It is already September. That's ridiculous. So for this month, I have decided to read Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. Now, I didn't know anything about the novel besides the opening line. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And I had no idea that this was about the French Revolution in the 1770s and beyond. That's a bit crazy to me. So the story kicks off that there's people being freed from the Bastille, and this one guy gets freed from prison after being imprisoned for about 15 years. And he makes up, reunites with his daughter, Lucy, and then there's these two guys who are fighting for her affection, that being Charles Darnay, an exiled French aristocrat, and Sidney Carton, a disreputable but brilliant English lawyer. This book is just full of filler. Some lines in this book are incredibly beautiful. I've actually highlighted them because I just think that they're brilliant ways to establish the time period, establish a scene. Charles Dickens keeps talking about the bank that one of the characters works at, and he had this whole spiel about why does everyone at a bank look like they're ancient and about to die? They bring in all of the younger guys, keep them in a closet until they age, and then finally bring them out into the front. That was very funny. I really liked that line. But then the rest of this book is just filled to the brim with just really, really bad filler dialogue from all these Cockney characters, and I hate reading about them because all they do is repeat themselves, I think, to fill his word count for the monthly issues that he had put out of this novel. I'm going to read an example to you because I actually saved it to prove my point. So I'm just going to read the dialogue, not the said or any of the other descriptors, and you'll know why I highlighted this part, obviously. You know the Old Bailey well, no doubt? Yes, sir, I do know the Bailey. Just so. And you know Mr. Lorry? I know Mr. Lorry, sir, much better than I know the Bailey. Much better. Then I, and as an honest tradesman, wish to know the Bailey. Very well, find the door where the witnesses go in, and show the doorkeeper this note for Mr. Lorry. He will let you in. Into the court, sir? Into the court. Why do you think of this? Why are they repeating themselves, and why does he keep asking, what did you say, what, huh? It's ridiculous. This book is just, why is there so much filler? The story itself actually isn't that bad. I am currently like 200 pages into the book because I admit I've been skipping a little bit because there were two chapters about a woman working at a storefront knitting. The first chapter was called Knitting, and the next chapter after that was called Knitting Continued. So I just said no, and I skipped it. But the whole triangle between Lucy, Charles, and Sidney actually isn't that bad. I think that's pretty compelling. And I like the commentary about the time period, the French Revolution, and everything that comes with it, of Paris, of England. So there are good parts in this story, but it's just not fun to, sift through all the little details. I find Dickens better short, because I really, really like The Christmas Carol. And the rest of the books that I've had to read off of this poster have been pretty bloated with crap, even though the story itself underneath is usually not so bad. So I will let you know my final thoughts very, very soon. Okay, so I have finished A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, and I am giving this book 2 stars. My critiques of the first half of the novel still stand. It was absolutely bombarded with just complete filler and waste of time, and the second half of the novel had the character Charles Darnay get married to Lucy, have a child with Lucy, and then Sidney stays in their life, but then they move to Paris, and they get, the revolution happens, and then for some reason he's criminally charged and sentenced to death with the guillotine. And so Sidney decides to take his place, because I guess they look alike, and he dies in his place. So he can have his family and not, fall victim to whatever is going on in Paris. I get it. I read the introduction to the novel, and I understand it was about the importance of, like, the intimacy of family over the idea of the political family or the national idea of, like, identity and family, and is also showing the, like, revolution and its consequences and stuff. It just wasn't that interesting to me. I feel like this book should be cut down a bit more, and I'm sure there are publications of this novel that, like, cut out a lot of the crap that I had to sift through, but it just wasn't that interesting of a read, even though there was some beautiful passages in here, as I said. Funnily enough, I feel like Les Mis did this better, and Les Mis is like the doorstop. It's like the pinnacle of completely useless information. Like, Victor Hugo goes on like 250 pages about the sewers of France, and he's not even talking about the main revolution. He's talking about one of the July or June rebellions. I can't remember which month it is. But yeah, that had more about the intimacy of relationships and character in it, more so than this did. I feel like Dickens wanted to show character in this, and it just didn't really, like, turn out well. It wasn't well executed. This was just a bit boring for me, and yeah, it's scratched off the poster now. I've read 65 books now. Very, very exciting stuff. So next month, I'm not really sure what I'm going to read, because I only have one more physical book. Oh, wait, no, I have 2 physical books. Okay, I know exactly what I'm going to read next month. I believe I will be reading In Cold Blood by Truman Capote next month. I forgot I had just bought that like a week ago, so that's exciting. So, yeah, see you next month. Hopefully, In Cold Blood will be better than A Tale of Two Cities. Hello. I know in the last clip I just made a huge big fuss about reading In Cold Blood by Truman Capote next month, and that is still true. I will be reading In Cold Blood by Truman Capote next month. However, it is still September, so while there were still days left in the month, I decided to read another book off of my poster. I read The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. I had a long work day and decided to read the entire book within my shift, and it was pretty good. Ultimately, I ended up giving the book 3 stars. It was a very easy to read book. It is about the main character, Holden Caulfield, as he is kicked out of school and tries to leave the school and go back to New York, fiddles around a bit, and then ultimately figures out where he wants to be in the world and what his purpose is. A lot of the book is him trying stuff and failing and realizing that he's kind of, boring guy. People don't really like him, doesn't really have purpose in life, and then, him going back to his sister in the end. The book had a really, different writing style. I understand why it, captured so many people. It's very easy to read and easy to understand, and the way he writes is like how teenagers speak. So that was really interesting to see, especially when it was published at that time. I don't really get why this book is considered such a red flag. Obviously, there are the ties to, the John Lennon murder, wasn't it? I only know that from South Park, kill John Lennon, which is still a really funny joke. But yeah, him, beating up his friends and, trying to hire a sex worker and trying to be with girls and, striking out, and him having just thoughts that aren't so great. That's teenage boys, so I don't understand why everyone, especially, the modern idea is, if this book is a guy's favorite book, that's a huge red flag. Girls read horrible characters all the time. They read weird stories, they read weird relationships that are taboo, they read about characters who have really bad thoughts, they read about characters who kill people, blah blah blah. That doesn't mean that they are that guy, they are that character, they are that person. So I just don't understand the kind of double standard there. I mean, the book is fine. It's easy to read and its messaging is clear. So if it is someone's favorite book, it's kind of more of a high school read, so I do agree that maybe you want to expand your horizons a bit. That's your favorite book. It doesn't really have a lot going for it, but otherwise I don't see the problem with it. It's an older book, and it was clearly involved in literary history. It was incredibly popular. There was controversy involved for an entirely different reason, and now the modern day connotation, I think, has just been tainted by that. It's a book. It exists. There's probably a lot of books like that in the world, so this one getting the bad rep, I think, is just tied to that controversy, but otherwise, not a big deal. And I'm sure it's not the most controversial book that I will have to read on the poster. So this one actually wasn't that bad to read this month. I didn't suffer as much as I did with A Tale of Two Cities. So I am hoping that next month, when I actually read In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, goes well. So I will finally see you then. I promise not to cut in again. Hello! Happy October! We are finally at October. See? No other interludes, I promised. And as I promised earlier, I am reading In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. This book is about a murder of a family, the Clutter family, that took place in 1959 in Holcomb, Texas. This goes through the night of the event, the investigation, and the resulting execution of the murderers, because he's got the full story in here. He went through the entire town, all of the investigation, and has created a sort of fictional account. So there's less, like, academic stuff. There's less, like, non-fiction, citation and stuff like that. It's more reading just like a novel, like it's completely fictionalized, but it is based on a real town and a real set of murders. I believe that this is probably the prototype for what is now known as true crime community and true crime non-fiction and stories and stuff. I am currently 1/3 of the way through it, and I am enjoying it a lot. I enjoy it more as a more descriptive tale rather than a just frank, brutal, and violent account of everything. He did describe the murders as they took place and how the bodies were found, but otherwise everything is very tasteful. I find true crime very uncomfortable and a little bit disgusting, so I don't really interact with that community too much. But this is very well done. I think it's just very tasteful. I think it's very tastefully done. I think that he's doing this to show just how well respected the family was and how shocking it was to this very, very small town that this murder took place seemingly without motive. I do not know the motive of the killers yet, but I will soon. And I'm really enjoying it. I don't dread reading it. I actually want to keep picking it up, so that is a good plus. I think it's a really good and fitting read for this month as well. So stay tuned for my final thoughts very, very soon. Hello there! So, I have finally finished In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, and I gave the book 4 stars. I think that this book was just an excellent recount of the Holcomb murders that took place in Kansas in 1959, and just following this small town as they eventually discovered the murder took place, and all the paranoia that the town went through, and then the storyline of the killers as they escaped, but ultimately got caught and were executed, which I think is just a wonderfully constructed tale that was just really well written. I loved the approach of this book. It wasn't gross, it wasn't exploitative, it was just very well done, and you could really capture the character of both the town, the family that were murdered, and the killers as well. There was a lot about the killers that just you understand not really why they did it, but more like how they could have come to eventually have done it. Because the scariest thing about this novel is ultimately that there was no motive. It was based on gossip, and that's, of course, incredibly frightening because most killings have a motive, and for the rare occasion that it was just a random family mentioned once that he thought about and eventually decided to just go out and do, horrifying. That is incredibly, incredibly horrifying. There were a lot of incredible passages in this book, like the part where the members of the town decided to volunteer and go into the house to clean up all of the blood and the murder eventually, was really poignant and really just emotionally captivating. I teared up at that part because that's just such a nice display of, like, care when it comes to the town. And the other part that I really liked was when the killers were in custody to be executed, one of them kept a pet squirrel. That's really cute. I love that. And, like, he taught the squirrel little tricks and stuff. I don't know, that's just really precious to me. So this was just a really fantastic book. I really enjoyed this. I am so glad when the poster gives me a book I would have never even heard about or never would have tried to read because this was true crime and I hate true crime. This was more like a novel in the way that it was told, and I really, really enjoyed this. This was great. I wish more true crime was tackled with this kind of kindness and care instead of being so, like, you know what I mean, when people are, like, doing their makeup or, like, baking and, like, doing a podcast and, like, making jokes and trying to make it all, like, cute and quirky while trying to sell, like, security cameras to you. You know, all of that critiques and discussions about true crime have been said by better people than me, but I wish more books were this, like, kind in real life events and just careful in its approach and really well researched. It seems like he talked to everybody in the town, even if they didn't matter, like, just to get an idea of what happened, because this town is super, super tiny, so he was probably able to do that. Like, anyone who was still there or still alive, he was just able to take his time with, and, like, that doesn't happen today. Everything happens so fast, so it's just nice to see the, like, careful approach he took to writing the story. I don't really know the background of it, but that's what I got from it. So stay tuned next month for when I read Far from the Maddening Crowd by Thomas Hardy. So see you then. Hello and welcome to November, that being the final part of this vlog. For the last book off of the poster, I'm reading Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. I think I've been calling it Far from the Maddening Crowd the whole time I've heard about this book from the poster. So this is a Victorian novel, previously I believe unpublished, or at least the edition I have is the full and complete novel that was never published. And I have heard about Thomas Hardy before because he wrote Tess of the Duberville, which I also have and will be reading after the poster book. And I don't really know much about this book. I am hesitant to say that it is romance. I'm thinking it's a romance book, but we will see. I'm only like 21 pages into it so far, and I really like the writing. The intro said that Thomas Hardy was a poet, and you can really, really tell. The writing style is just beautiful, and I'm very captivated by it. The first 20 pages was not hard to read. I wasn't, you know, dragging along. I didn't slow down my reading. It was very, very, very well written. So far, I'm hoping this is going to be a good book to end the entire year on. So stay tuned for my next thoughts soon. I'm in my dog's spot, and he's pacing right now. Hi. Hi. So I'm halfway through Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy, and I'm really enjoying it so far. The character Bathsheba is actually pretty cool. I like the way that she's sort of flirty and haughty, and I like the way that she's like interacting with the men in the novel. I'm actually pretty interested in the work of like a shepherd. That's really interesting how the author puts in a lot of like sheep descriptions and stuff like that. And so far I like both Boldwood and what's his name? Gabriel. I like them both, and I don't care who she ends up with between those two. They're kind of both the same, but I'm sure, you know, it's a sort of like higher standing versus lower standing between those two. I just met Sergeant Troy, and obviously I don't like him, but yeah, buddy? Yeah? I don't think he's meant to be liked. So far, I'm really enjoying this. The writing is just absolutely beautiful, breathtaking, and actually pretty easy to read, aside from a few words that I don't understand, but that's pretty common in older books. And so far, not a lot of horrible, outdated references to like race or class or anything like that. Some of the descriptions of gender are obviously not up to date, but hey, what can you do? This book is from 1874, and so far I'm really liking it. I think it's my favorite out of the ones that I have read from the poster for this quarter. So stay tuned for my final thoughts very soon. Here we are at the end of the month, well, the middle of the month, and the end of the video. I have finished Far from the Madding Crowd, Far from the Mating Crowd by Thomas Hardy, and I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I really ended up liking this book. I liked finding out like what happened to all the suitors, what was going on in the book. I know in my last clip I said I wouldn't mind if Bathsheba ended up with Boldwood or Gabriel. Boldwood, you know, gradually became who he became at the end, and at the end, all that crazy shit that I was not expecting from a Victorian novel. Pretty bold, pretty just like shocking. I really liked it a lot. I could not stand Sergeant Troy, so the event that happened was awesome. I loved that outcome for him. That was great. And the ending for me was actually pretty satisfying, because at the end, it's Gabriel and Bathsheba together. That's not really a spoiler, you sort of get that. And I really liked how the plot of the book was handled. And I liked that all of these suitors represented different things. Troy was more into like arguing with her, kind of into that fire, that back and forth, into just, you know, that young aspect of getting to know each other. And Boldwood was into, you know, like the infatuation of her, the chase. He was more obsessive in his courting. Meanwhile, Gabriel was just there for her and gave his advice and was kind of her moral compass for a lot of what happened in the book. And he judged her, but he told her the truth. And I think that that was the best development for their relationship, because ultimately they were there for each other during the worst parts of their life, during the best parts of their life. And her actually getting into the dirt and doing all of the farming, and they bonded that way. So very good book. Very well written. I like this book a lot. Only 4 stars though, because it's not a favorite of all time, but I am so glad I picked up this book, because I only knew about Tess of the Duberville. I had no idea that Thomas Hardy also wrote this book, so I am so glad that the poster led me in this direction, because it could have just done Tess of the Dubervilles, which is his most well-known book. But I really liked this one. This one's really good. It's actually also, the writing's pretty approachable. I know a lot of people don't want to get into older books, older classics, older Victorian books, because the writing sometimes is just too far away from your own reading comprehension. This one is pretty good. Also, a lot of the events in the novel were pretty shocking for the time period. I understand that this is definitely the late Victorian period, so there was a lot of transition going on in genre. When you think of like Jane Austen and other books of that era, a lot of the things going on are very interpersonal. There's not a lot of action. There's a few dramatic moments, but it's all based in character. This has guns in it. Gun happens, and like crazy stuff, and like deaths happen, and just a lot of character drama, but then just a lot of like straight up whoa. So yeah, this book was the perfect book to cap off the year for me. So thus far, off of the poster, I have read 68 books, and I finally got a bingo on the poster with this book. So this book Great way to end off this year. So that's it for the 100 Epic Reads of a Lifetime poster for the year 2023. Look forward to next year when I read way more books off of the poster. I'm getting so close to finishing it. I think I will finish it by 2025. We'll say that. Who knows if I'll have to pick up a few more, double up 1 month or what, but yeah. Stay tuned for me finishing off this poster before my lifetime is over, hopefully. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you all next year. Bye-bye.